Here we are, first day of winter in southern Idaho. Seems like a good time to talk about an island. Not the tropical variety, obviously. Hard to find those in Idaho. We're talking about Cougar Island in Payette Lake, nestled right up there in McCall. We told you about Cougar Island back in September, about the state of Idaho looking to sell it and then create funds per state code. Conservation folks across Idaho, they had concerns about selling state land to private owners. But after the saga through 2022, we now have the final vote on the island sale. Conservation advocates say it is a win-win-win situation. Here's Joe Paris.
Idaho conservation advocates had major concerns about the future of this island on Payette Lake throughout the year 2022. Cougar Island is owned by the state, but Idaho is looking to sell the land to maximize financial return. Per state regulations, the Idaho Constitution requires the state land board to, quote, maximize financial return over the long term, mainly to benefit Idaho public schools. Scott Phillips with the Idaho Department of Land explained the thought process of the land board earlier this year.
In this case, with one lessee on the property, it really is an underperforming asset given the value of that property. So the land board made the decision in a very public way in 2018, and then again rediscussing that in January and February of 2021 through the Payette Endowment Land Strategy to sell the parcel, bring it to auction, and do something different with the proceeds to earn more money for our school children.
Conservation supporters worried that private ownership and development of the lots would compromise their conservation efforts. In the fall, everything was up in the air. The island went to a public auction where anyone could bid on the lots on the land. Another interesting aspect, a leaseholder of the lot with the cabin was at the auction to try and win the auction so his family could own the land instead of leasing it from the state. Well, that one lot,
2.52 acres for $2,025,000.
It sold for a little more than $2 million. Jonathan Oppenheimer with the Idaho Conservation League says that bid, it began a winning process for conservation advocates.
One of our partners within United Payette, which is kind of an umbrella organization of a number of community interests and stakeholders, a group called Payette Land Trust, worked with that successful bidder and the current homeowner to establish a conservation easement on his property. So it basically says there won't be any further development and his property won't be used to facilitate additional development of Cougar Island if and when the state does put some of those parcels back on the market.
Oppenheimer explains. The Payette Land Trust was able to contribute to the family's land purchase in exchange for a conservation agreement.
By having Payette Land Trust step in with some additional dollars, it helped him to actually close on his parcel. And so some dollars were contributed to that purchaser, and then that helped him ensure that he had the financing available to actually acquire that property. So it was a win-win both for the homeowner as well as for Payette Land Trust and conservation interests.
But that is only one lot on Cougar Island. What about the rest? Well, remember that auction? Only one piece of land sold there, so it's possible the state could try again in the future.
I think the big question is going to be, what's going to happen next year? What's going to happen a couple of years down the line? We continue to see a lot of development pressure in McCall and across the state, and so, as we see, the volatility in the real estate market, and if we see, prices start to skyrocket again, there's a chance that the Department of Lands could put some of Cougar Island or also Shellworth Island up on the market for a potential sale. And ultimately from Conservation League's perspective, as well as many, if not all, of the stakeholders in Valley County and McCall, we want to see that open space preserved.
So the golden question right now, we touched on this, will the state of Idaho again try to sell Cougar Island? And Brian, really what this comes down to is if the state of Idaho thinks they can make money off of it. As we touched on, the state board, their idea here is to take endowment land, make the most profit possible.
Right.
Selling it was a big idea, but there wasn't any buyers, as we touched on. So they'll have to go back to the drawing board. One idea conservation advocates have is try to turn Cougar Island into some type of recreational dollars.
Okay.
We'll see in 2023, though, what happens.
Still requires some infrastructure, somebody to kind of put the money toward making that a place where people would want to go, kind of thing. All right, we will see. Thanks, Joe. There's an update. The 7 days of the 208 continues, where we redial some of our favorite stories of the year. Today, day 5, we decided to mix it up a bit. There are roughly 1.8 million people living in Idaho, and obviously we couldn't meet all of them, but in the last 12 months, we did our best to meet as many as we could. A look back at the interesting people we met in 2022.
For decades, it's dark history,
The 208 may be distinguished by its places,
And there aren't too many places that were built back then that are still around.
exactly, but it's defined
But not you.
No, I do the news.
by its people.
And they set off the cannon, and it broke all the windows in the post office.
There were those who left their mark,
There's a line in Rent, the musical, that the answer to war isn't peace, it's creation. And I've always loved that line. I think, that's the best thing you can do.
and those who made their point. Since 1998, some version of this group of gals has come together once a week
We have stuffers, we have sewers.
You got my stuffer?
with one task in hand.
We are making teddy bears for the children.
We met some world-class athletes, turning 3 national junior titles before he turned 19 into a professional career in Europe. Matteo took his first turn on the tour on the day he turned 23.
But it might be Matteo Jorgensen who's played it perfectly, and here he comes just behind with Nick Schultz. Let's see if they don't work together.
Both young
I'm young, and it was my first tour, and I think I performed well and showed that, I have the potential to do it in the future. So.
and a bit older.
My nickname is Mama Wilkie.
But how old she is only highlights how new this sport actually is. Next month in Argentina, women's street luge will be recognized internationally for the first time.
To be part of that inaugural women's division is bucket list stuff.
Some we've met before. But in February of 1989, those downhill dreams were sidetracked when Muffy, on a training run, crashed through a fence at nearly 50 miles an hour. At the age of 16, Muffy Davis was paralyzed from the chest down, but only found out this summer they would be enshrined forever as a Hall of Famer, as a 2022 Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame inductee.
And what I noticed is there's more women than men being inducted this year. I love it. You don't even dream about these things. It's bigger than dreams. You dream about, winning medals and making teams, but being inducted into a Hall of Fame, it's just a whole new level.
Everybody needs to give.
Another level is one of legacy, which is what we learned will be left for the next Gem State generation. The small city of Weippe gave a big thank you to Mayor Norm Stedman Monday night.
It is the end of an era.
For 5 decades, Stedman was the steady man for this Idaho town, becoming Idaho's longest-serving mayor ever along the way, according to a governor's proclamation given to Norm in 2017. 5 decades of service is what made Marie Osborne stand out, starting in 1972.
At that time, Idaho was the first state in the nation to license nurse practitioners to try to respond to the needs of rural communities. Mom was the first licensed.
With that new license, the 41-year-old mother of 5 opened up Stanley's first emergency clinic on June 19th, Father's Day, 1972.
Then people started coming in for their allergy shots and blood pressure checks and chest pain, and so you sort of have to end up being a jack of all trades.
Over the year, we met some people who made us reflect.
We have failed in showing true justice to the people because we are divided by the ideology of very narrow-minded ideology that we are holding on to. It's sad.
Some who made us laugh.
And my mom would always say, what are you, a comedian? So, yes. But now I just look like Rasputin, the used car salesman.
Along the top of
And
the
some
cliff.
who made us cry.
Then the fog lifted and the invasion was on. We took on survivors from that, but it was burning. And when we were trying to lift them up to the ship, the skin would come off. And that's one of the worst memories that I have.
Bob Haga wasn't the only World War II vet we met.
I was always somebody that wanted to do something special, but I wasn't special and I knew it.
Betty's road to remarkability revealed itself when she was just 19.
And suddenly, this voice comes with the radio and said, "We are interrupting this program to bring you the news."
So you joined because of Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Nampa's Betty Martin was one of the first female Marines.
They always say once a Marine, always a Marine, right?
That's true. I cry. I cry every time I hear the march.
Betty turned 100 this summer. Meanwhile, you see, Don is turning 95 years old, and he marked his milestone this past February.
My mom and dad were both World War II veterans. God bless you, Mr. Don.
In 1944, Don joined the Marines out of Sioux City, Iowa, at the age of 17.
They took 17-year-olds if your mother signed for you.
Anxious to serve his country.
The war was going on. I was afraid it was going to end before I got in it.
Just days after turning 18, as a member of the 5th Marine Division, Don found himself on a beach in the Battle of Iwo Jima.
They let us crowd the beach of the Marines, and then they opened up on us.
But on his birthday, Don was opening a lot of well wishes.
We're up to 124 cards from 33 states and Washington, D.C., 2 from England, 1 from Japan, and a handful of handmade cards from students.
I think somebody's thinking of me anyway.
All of them gave us something to think about this year and for several years to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
You know, according to the National World War II Museum, we are losing 180 World War II veterans a day. Just about 2 weeks after we met, well, Don Brown was still getting more than a handful of cards and letters a day. Marine Corporal Don Brown became one of those that we lost, passing away after falling in his bathroom. His daughter told us Don received nearly 400 cards and letters for his birthday from governors and senators from around the country and around the world. His daughter made sure he read every one before he died. Speaking of people we met this year, one of our favorites was a young, and I mean very young, author whose dream was to have one of his books in the library. He did that himself, and it caught the attention of the entire nation. You have some comments you want to share about our show? How about a story idea? Even just your random thoughts would be fine. Text us, 208-321-5614. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. Oh, and keep them clean, keep them clever, and keep them kind of concise, because we want to share a few at the end of the show. People self-publishing books is not a new thing, but it's one thing to send it out to your library, your literary work, I should say, to the world via the internet, and it's another to just send it out to the world by just putting that book on a shelf. Earlier this year, we met a Boise kid who became a full-fledged author by putting the prosperity of his prose into his own hands, literally, and he became a publishing prodigy, known worldwide, all by himself.
Ada Lake Hazel, this is Tara. How can I help you?
The Lake Hazel branch of the Ada County Library
What's the name of it?
is a bastion for books.
I think it's between 40 and 50,000 books at this location. We have books for adults, books for children, books for kids that are learning to read, picture books, so yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Which is why 8-year-olds like Dylan Helbig,
this is your library,
Yes.
feel right at home.
Well, not like my library, but I don't own it.
Except Dylan does possess a capacity for creativity.
And then this is the part where Santa comes.
Dylan
I like the pictures.
likes to write his own books.
One day in winter,
Yeah.
it was Christmas.
So he has been writing books since he was about 5 years old.
His latest,
It's The Adventures of Dylan Helbig's Christmas.
he finished last month.
That's you.
Yeah. By Dylan Helbig himself.
Taking an empty journal, a gift from his grandma,
And me unwrapping a Nerf gun.
and filling it in just 2 days.
Even though it has 81 pages.
So you're in the book.
Yes, I am in the book.
Who else is in the book?
My mom,
Who else?
Santa,
Who else?
a giant turkey.
Okay, so what does Dylan do in the book?
So first he decorates the tree.
And the star has a bomb.
No, I think someone overnight put a bomb in there and it just exploded.
And
I get sucked into the portal and I go into the very first Thanksgiving.
ah, the giant turkey.
Everything about it was a bit crazy.
Got it.
I know some of the words.
Writing a book
Yeah, because some of the words are my sight words.
wasn't what impressed his mom the most.
So this one I just figured was like any other one that he has written.
It was what Dylan did with his book that caught her by surprise.
I didn't know this was his ultimate plan.
His plan he put in play days later.
I've been wanting to put a book in a library since I was 5.
But that takes editors and publishers and distributors, doesn't it?
You know, you can't just put your book on the shelf.
Or can you? Well, Dylan did.
There was a lot of librarians that I had to get past, so do you know what I did?
What'd you do?
I covered this part and covered the back with my body and just snuck it in like this. I came in running, and then I started to walk. And then I came in this aisle. No, wait, this aisle. And then I put my book right here.
Complete with stickers on the spine, so it would look like it belonged.
And the next time I came back, it was gone.
That night at home, he told his mom.
I thought that we had lost it, you know, and I figured somebody would probably find it and put it in Lost and Found.
I think my mom called the library.
His parents were worried that we would find his book and we would get rid of it, which was an unfounded fear.
Because if there's ever a place a book would be safe, it would be here.
True.
Well, they found it.
I think it was in our stories section.
And the librarians?
Every page is illustrated.
Loved it.
Yeah, and it's a good story.
And they wanted it.
Dylan's book definitely fit all of the criteria that we would look for to include a book in our collection.
So with permission, they processed it, put on the proper stickers, and now, The Adventures of Dylan Helbig's Christmas
by Dylan himself
is a full-fledged library book.
Now it's in the system. Anybody with a library card can check out the book. You may have to wait a few weeks at this point.
There's actually a waiting list. People want to check it out. So there's like 4 people in line. And it's just like mind-blowing.
Chapter 4.
Not bad for an 8-year-old who's been waiting to get a book in the library since he was 5.
And now I did it.
Yeah, it's not the normal process for including a book into a library collection, but in this scenario, it worked for Dylan.
And he puts his mind to something and he makes it happen, so.
I always be sneaky, like how I get chocolate.
Doesn't surprise me at all that he did this.
And this is page 81. We'll be right back in the next book. The end.
Okay, so there are several updates since we first met Dylan. Yes, he did write a sequel. Not exactly a sequel, though. But he's done more than one book. He finished The Jacket-Eating Closet and Dylan and the Missing Fairy Tale. Those books are now done. And he's working on a third, Dylan and the Cyborgs. Dylan became famous since last February, by the way, appearing on the Today Show, Good Morning America, Inside Edition. He was in People magazine, in the Washington Post, and in the New York Times. He was on NPR, the BBC. But get this past summer, probably his biggest accomplishment, he helped teach a class for young authors at the Lake Hazel Library. And because of that, they have included an entire section for self-published kids. So now they don't have to, quote, always be sneaky, like the way Dylan gets his chocolate, to get their books in the library. Check it out. There's that, look at that. The Feeling of the Monsters, that's one of the books. My Person is Sad. There's even one called The Interplanetary Conflict. Look out, George Lucas, he's coming after you. Okay, so how does one get their hands on The Adventures of Dylan Helbig's Christmas by Dylan himself? Unfortunately, you can't anymore, at least not right now. Dylan's parents told me they pulled the book because they were afraid it would get lost or damaged. And when they decided to do this, The wait list for that book was 10 years long. Dylan would be more than twice his age before he got that book back. So they pulled it to keep it safe, and they're now in talks with some publishers to get a couple copies made so they can return it to the shelves of the Lake Hazel Library.
It's officially the first day of winter. We're officially all the way out of fall, and man, is it feeling like it for lots of the U.S. There is polar air that's moving south and affecting much of the central and north parts of the country. And since it's the first day of winter, I want to kind of explain a little bit what does that mean? Which way as which part of the orbit are we currently in? So typically for this time of year, we see the shortest day and longest night, and that means the northern hemisphere is pointing away from the sun and the southern hemisphere is pointing towards it. So that's why we have less daylight in the northern portions of the zone. So on this first day of winter, temperatures are a little bit warmer, but tomorrow morning they're looking to be much colder in the single digits.
Final minute or so of the show on this Wednesday. Let's get to your comments that you sent in during today's show. This one from Jason. Thank you for highlighting some of the amazing people of Idaho. Some made me laugh, some made me cry. We live in an amazing state with amazing people from top to bottom. It's one of our favorite times of the year to kind of recap all the people we've met and the stories we've done throughout the year. Thank you for running the Bob Haga video. He's turning 97 this January. And the fact he lived through D-Day still amazes me. I'm proud to know him and call him my friend, says Kelly Goff up in McCall. Of course, he is a treasure, obviously, to have here in Idaho. The 208, so nice to see a child add a book to the library instead of adults trying to take children's books away. That's a very good point, Pat. Nice way to point that out. In fact, that's still a problem in some areas of the state. Books still being pulled from shelves as we speak. What happened to Dylan's book? I've been 7th on the wait list for since you first covered his story back in February of this year, says Lonnie and Boise. You were one of the first, because when we talked to him, there were 4. You became 7, but as you heard, they took it off the shelf because they didn't want it to get lost or damaged. But hopefully we'll get it back soon after they get somebody to kind of print up a fresh copy for all of his fans out there. Again, it was up to a 10-year waiting list. You're one of the first, Lonnie. Really enjoying the retrospective of year's stories. Watch the 208 from day one. Brian, Joe, Andrew, and all. Happy holidays. You all do a great job. Thank you very much for saying so. And yes, you too also have a great holiday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.